Okay guys, today we're going to discuss guibos or flex discs, whatever you'd like to call them. So there's just some information I want to throw out there and some misinformation I want to clear up with certain things. Let's start off by the three that you're going to see in any E30 or E36. I'm sure there's other models that have the same one. So you're going to see there's basically two different kinds, kind of three, but not really. We'll talk about this in a second. So you've got basically your large and your small. Start off with the small here. You're gonna see this in most E30s is this small one. The only ones that got the larger one were the early E models, though throughout the years I'm sure sometimes people have swapped things out. So just because your car is in an early E doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to have a large one. And just because you have an early E, you might also have a small one. You never know. So basically, basically the easiest way to tell if you don't just kind of know visually, they're much bigger. One's much bigger than the other, but simple way to tell is the small uses 10 millimeter bolts, the large uses 12 millimeter bolts, and easy way to tell which one you have is the large one will use a bolt with an 18 millimeter hex head on it. Sometimes I've seen 19, and with the small you'll see a 17, a 16. Like I said, I don't know why I've seen both, but let's say you'll have a 16 or a 17 with this one, and usually a 17 or I'm sorry, 16 or a 17 with this one, and usually an 18 or a 19 with the large one. Now, this one in particular is also a large one, but it is a little bit not as fat as you could tell. This one is from an E36 328. This one is from a E36 M3. So you can see there is a bit of a size difference. Now both will work. This one's a little bit more stout, and the drive shaft, the nut and the spline drive shaft will take up the slack either way. So it doesn't really matter which one you have. If you could choose though, go with the M3 one. It is a little bit more stout. Now, just a real quick thing, installation. I don't know if you could see here, but there's an arrow, and this one's pointed downwards. So you want to make sure that the arrow points to a flange. So if the drive shaft was on this side and the transmission was on this side, you would want to make sure that this arrow, when the drive shaft goes on and there's three bolt holes, that it's pointed to the flange that's on the drive shaft, which will be here, here, and here. So these three will be pointed towards the drive shaft flange, and these three will point towards the transmission flange. So if you look at it and it's off and they're not pointed to a flange, all you have to do is rotate it by one bolt hole and you'll have it on the right direction. This goes for every guibo, whether large or small, it does not matter. Now, besides that, make sure you torque them down to spec. Make sure you change the bolts when you replace them, especially if you have a daily driver. Maybe you don't really do anything with it, you'll probably be fine. But I have broken many bolts before I realized, hey, I should probably just start changing them. And then once I changed them, they were fine. So just make sure that they're torqued to spec. Make sure that you change them, and you won't have any problems. So it'll just make things easier for you. That's really it. It's super straightforward to install now. I'm not going to really get into replacing. I just wanted to do a quick video on the different sizes and how they are installed. Now, if that's all you came here to see, then that's it. You're good to go. You could end the video here. But if you want to know a little bit more about this guy, I'm going to discuss that now, because there is some pretty bad information out there with in terms of this revshift guibo. So let's start off with why you might want to use this guy. Years ago, I've always used the small one on my car, and then about 2 years ago, I was drifting actually. The car makes about 600 horsepower, and this guy let go. Now granted, it was my fault for kind of pushing it where I knew that, hey, there's a weird vibration going on, I should probably check things, but um, it was time to do a burnout, so you can't really not do a burnout when people tell you to do a burnout. So I popped the clutch, and this guy let go, proceeded to destroy the whole back half of my transmission, my DSSR, my shifter, the drive shaft, the transmission cross member, and a few other small things. So at that point, I said, well, I got to replace it anyway. I was going to go with a large guibo. I said, I might as well. That's when revshift got in touch with me, and they sent me this. And I said, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I, like you guys, have heard some horror stories about it. But I said, hey, what do I have to lose? And I'm very thankful that I went with it. So let's discuss why. Let's discuss why you'd want to even go with this flex disc. So if your car is a daily driver, a weekend car, you don't really, stock power, soft poly or stock engine mounts. If it's not a dedicated track car, don't buy this. You don't want it. You're going to cause yourself more headache than it's worth. If your car is a dedicated track car, dedicated drift car, whatever it may be, I recommend that you do look into checking this out. So there's a few caveats to running this flex disc, in my opinion. One of them is you should have either very stiff poly or solid engine, transmission, differential, subframe. All your mounts should be solid. And the second and third thing is make sure your drive shaft is in very good shape, or in my case I just had it rebuilt locally, so I knew everything was good. There was no U-joint play or anything like that. Check your driveline angles, make sure everything is lined up, make sure your transmission cross member isn't twisted like mine was, which I didn't realize it until I kind of compared it to a new one, and I said, oh, okay, well, that's a problem. So make sure all these things are correct before you use this, because if your driveline angle is off, or one of your mounts is bad, or something is not lined up properly, you're going to have vibration problems. I've had my car up to 150 miles an hour, and I've had zero issues with vibration. No problems whatsoever the 2 years that I've used this. Another thing that people kind of complain about this is that, oh, it explodes. And to be fair, revshift did do a batch that was not done with aluminum. I think it was like a plastic or a poly or something, and those did have problems. They would break, and but they kind of said, hey, we messed up. And anyone who has had or has one of those plastic ones has no problem, getting it exchanged for the aluminum ones. So again, some information that's out there that's just wrong. And finally, something I hear all the time is, oh, it's a flex disc, it needs to flex, you're going to destroy your transmission output flange bearings, and it's no. I have had this for 2 years. I have had the same GetRag 260 for 2 years, and if I wasn't switching to a 265 because I want to, I would still be running the same transmission, and I have no problems with it. Another great thing is that I got in touch with him. I said, hey, listen, it's kind of starting to show its age. There's I don't know if you can see it. There's some cracking going on there. I mean, it's old. So I got in touch with revshift, and new kit. I can rebuild it, and I'm good to go. Whereas with these, I would swap them out every 6 months or so, just to make sure that nothing happens. And 2 years into this, and I'm only rebuilding it now. So definitely a bit of a cost savings there as well in the long run. That's really it. I have nothing bad to say about it. Yes, you will get a little bit more driveline noises. Maybe a little bit's an understatement. Probably a decent amount of driveline noises with the more solid coupling. But I think if your car's a track car, you kind of expect that anyway. And that's really it. If anyone has any questions, feel free to throw it in the comments, and thanks for watching.